So it's such a privilege and honor to be part of this year's European Astrology Conference, and I will be presenting the romantic epic by Nezami Ganjavi called Seven Figures, Haft Peykar. And I must give my sincere gratitude to Ehsan Khazani for giving a workshop on this particular text and introduced me to all of the astrological aspects of it. And I combine all of the teachings that he brought with my experience as a Sufi and a translator of Sufi texts, so that combined I am able to bring this presentation for you today. First, there's going to be an overview of Nezami Ganjavi and Haft Peykar, the poet, and the text that we're going to talk about. Then we're going to go into the planetary allegories and astrological themes and how it connects to Sufism and also the practice of astrology in Iran in general. And finally, at the end, we will do a recap of how they shape the cultural and astrological significance that they have or they had during the time that it existed all over Iranian culture and also to this day. So let us begin with Nezami Ganjavi, born in the 12th century in Ganje, which is in modern Azerbaijan. Not much is known about his life. All we know that he was a polymath and he had great immense knowledge in literature, in astrology, in different languages, in theology, Islamic philosophy. The general idea that most of the Iranian poets actually combine all of these knowledges from different disciplines into poetry. His legacy as a Farsi poet was a more realistic and colloquial style to the Persian epic, which means that before that, for example, Ferdowsi, who would write in an archaic form with grand words and also celestial themes, which was for the kings, for the literate. But Nezami's way of storytelling and his use of words is so simplistic. It's so easy to understand, yet it is profound, it is deep, which was followed by the later poets like Attar and also Rumi, for example. And then we get to his collection of books, which is called Khamsa, something that has 5 parts. The other name for it is Panj Ganj, or 5 treasures. Khamsa is a retelling of 5 stories. These epics have been part of the Iranian culture and Iranian history for years, but Nezami took these stories and he told them his way. So the first one is Makhzan al-Asrar, or the Treasury of Mysteries. It's a group of treatises on morality, mysticism, wisdom, and general knowledge that shows how versed he is. And then we have Khosrow wa Shirin, or Khosrow and Shirin, which is a romantic epic tragedy. It's also in Shahnameh, Ferdowsi's Book of Kings. Layli wa Majnun. This one is not an epic tragedy, it is a romantic tragedy, and it has actually inspired most of the Sufi literature. On the path of love, you have to sacrifice many things, especially yourself. And then we have Iskandarname, or the Book of Alexander, which is again a retelling of the adventures of Alexander. And then finally we have Haft Peykar, which is a romantic biography. It tells the story of Bahram Gur. So as you can see, all of these stories, they are retellings of past events, and they all have philosophical, moral, and theological, and most importantly, mystical connotations and themes towards them. I'm going to recap the story of Haft Peykar and slowly get into the astrological themes of it, of why it is such an important book when it comes to Iranian astrology. Haft Peykar is basically 4 parts. The first one is the prologue, which is customary in all of Persian literature, basically, or classical Persian literature. So at the beginning, we have praising God. It's because of the power of God that I can write this, and all of the knowledge that I have comes from the Prophet, and it was by the majesty and the royalty of this patron that I am able to write this book. And I am writing this book because I want to retell this story that is so epic and it's so beautiful, and I just want to bring about my ideas from it. And the reason for that is because all the knowledge in the world is translated and transmitted through speech and thought, and in order to have grand, successful, useful lives, we have to use the knowledge of the past and the innovations of the now to carry on this journey and be another brick in the wall of knowledge. And this last part is the advice that Nezami gives to his son. After the prologue is done, we get into the actual story. And this is the biggest chunk of the book. It's the life of Bahram. Bahram is an actual historic Sassanian king. He was Bahram V, known as Bahram Gur, between 406 and 438. He was one of the greatest kings of the Sassanian Empire, and he was known by Bahram Gur because Gur means a zebra. And he was really fond of hunting zebras, and he was really good at it. His life was so amazing. Just like Alexander, he became a mythological figure in and of itself, and a lot of stories came out of it, and one of them is this Haft Peykar. The beginning part of the life of Bahram is, yes, where he was born. He was born in Yemen, and then he had to grow up outside the court, and then he had to prove himself to the court. His father wasn't a great king. He went through a lot of trials and a lot of difficulties to prove that he is a worthy king, and he finally became king. And there were a lot of conquering neighbors who were trying to get the land, but he abolished all of the rebels and all of the outside and inside enemies, and finally became king. After Bahram becomes king and does all of those things, we get to the main part of the Haft Peykar, or 7 figures. First, I must say the reason that I chose the word figures for Peykar is that because Peykar has many meanings. The first one, or the most general one, is exterior body. So it can mean a human body, a tower, an image, a painting, and it can also mean a statue. All of these things comes out of Peykar. And then there is another one which is more important, is the 7 celestial planets. They were also called Peykar. They were seen as bodies that are moving around. So Haft Peykar can have all of these different meanings inside of it. And that is actually reflected in what the story is. The story of Haft Peykar is Bahram marries 7 princesses from the 7 neighboring nations around Iran, and then he builds a tower so grand and beautiful with 7 domes, and each of those domes have a color attributed to one planet, and those 7 princesses, each of them live inside one of those domes, and during 1 week, Bahram goes every night to one of these domes, dressed in one of the colors attributed to that dome, to spend time with that princess. And by spend time, you know what I mean. But of course, before getting to that, the princess would tell Bahram a story coming from her land. This is one of the things that I will get to a bit later, the role of the inner circle of the king, especially the women that he would marry, were to entertain him. First by dancing, then by singing, then by storytelling, and then with the act of making love. And this is what happens in these 7 days, that each day Bahram goes into one of these domes, spends time with one of those princesses, and hears a tale from them. And all of these 7 within 7 attributions and correspondences, they are all filled with the idea of Iranian astrology on the 7 planets. So this book becomes a narrative, a way of looking at the hero's journey of the planets, or what does the planets teach us? What are the things that we're going to learn? And that becomes another deeper layer of the story of Bahram with regards to these 7 stories that are told to him, that they are moral stories that they want to turn him into a good king. These 7 experiences with these 7 princesses, they change who he is as a king. And I'm just going to give another foreshadowing that you can sense the parallels of this story with the story of 1001 Nights, or the Arabian Nights, where the storytelling of Shahrazad changed the ideas and the personalities of the king. I will get to that later. So after these 7 stories are done, then we go to the last part of the story, which is the epilogue. And what happens is, since Bahram has neglected his empire and has given his duties to the ministers, his empire is declining and he's not aware of it. And he chooses 7 victims and asks them to tell their story of the difficulties that they have gone through. And that makes Bahram understand that his minister has been abusing his power. So Bahram fixes that. He executes the minister and gives all of the things to the people. This last part is a reflection of the fact that Bahram, who was a hothead when he was young and then when he became king, after these 7 stories, he went through those transformations, and this was a kind of a last test to see if he has learned his lessons. And by releasing these 7 victims and executing the minister, it shows that he did go to the place that he was meant to go. And that is the end of his story. One day he goes hunting for the gur, or the zebra. He fixes on a zebra and runs towards the zebra, but the zebra goes into a cave. Bahram goes also into the cave and he gets lost in the cave and no one sees him ever again. And that is the end of the story of Bahram. And finally, the book ends by Nezami praise for the longevity and the prosperity of his patron. That is the general concept of Haft Peykar. And as you can see, it has a lot of astrological themes. And I'm going to focus mostly on the meanings of the planets and how different allegories, different representations combine can get an understanding of what the 7 planets mean in the Iranian astrology, or at least the way that Nezami saw it, and also what kind of moral and spiritual teachings they have for each of us. Before I get to that, I'm gonna say a couple of more technical astrological things that were interesting in this book, which shows that Nezami was a really well-versed person in astrology. But I'm not gonna get into all of them. I'm gonna say a couple of them. The idea of planets as a means for our spiritual ascent. Nezami talks about this by connecting the concept of rising in the planets and understanding the meanings of each planet to the experience that the Prophet Muhammad had on his day of ascent, or Mi'raj. For those of you who don't know the story, in one night the Prophet Muhammad was taken by this figure that you see here, which is called the Buraq. It was taken up above the 9 heavens to see God and have a conversation with God. In his introduction and his praise of the Prophet Muhammad, Nezami talks about the notion of, if you understand these planets and if you devote yourself to the Sufi path, you will also imitate the procedure that the Prophet did and elevate the 7 planets and go up. These books back then were written for kings. So this Haft Peykar, this allegory, all of those things are a kind of passive way of criticizing the king, or passive way of telling the king that you have a lot of responsibilities. You are kind of like the prophet. You are the Lord over us. So you do have to work on yourself and ascend through the planets. Nezami gives us the birth chart of Bahram. This is what it says. طالعش هوت و مشتری در هوت، زهره با اوچ و لعل با یاقوت، ماه در ثور و تیر در جوزا، اوج مریخ در اسد پیدا. زحل از دلو با قویرایی، خصم را داده باد پیمایی. زنب آورده روی در زحلش، و آفتاب افتاده در حملش. داده هر کوکبی شهادت خیش، همچو برجیس بر سعادت خیش. So his ascendant was in Pisces, and Jupiter was there, and Venus was there, and Moon is in Taurus, Sun is in Aries, Saturn and Ketu, which is Dragon's Tail, are in Aquarius. And as you can see, this is an amazing chart. We have Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury in their own house, and we have Venus, Sun, and the Moon exalted. Mars is not that exciting where it is, but it is still an amazing chart. And actually, when the astrologers of the court saw this chart, they were like, this must be a great king, and it came out to be. One of the things that Ehsan Khazini did in the workshop that was really amazing was to check and see if this chart is actually plausible and it can happen. The first thing that comes up when you look at this chart is that you cannot have Mercury in Gemini because it will be so far from the sun, and Mercury never goes far from the sun. The second thing is, after our calculations, Ehsan Khazini's calculation actually, we came to a date and a time that was really similar to this chart. It's on 15th April 492 at 3:20 in Isfahan, and you can see we have Jupiter and Venus and ascendant, and then you have Mercury here. It has to be here, it cannot go all the way to Gemini here. And then you have Sun in Aries, you have the Moon in Taurus, you have Zanab or Dragon's Tail, and also Saturn in Aquarius. But Mars is not in Leo, Mars is in Gemini. There are a couple of reasons why this could happen, but I'm just gonna tell the main one, which is they just changed a lot of things as astrologers. When they would see the chart of a king, and if there was something not particularly interesting or something unfortunate in it, they wouldn't show it to the king, and they would change that. Another thing that is interesting about this chart is that you can see the date, it's 492, and as you saw here, Bahram's birthday is 406. So these 90 years of difference is too much. And the reason for that, again, could be that the way that they were calculating the years were not correct, or the most probable one is that this chart did exist and it was such a glamorous chart that they just attributed it to Bahram, even though it was like a bit close to it. All we know is that Nezami did have this chart and he did work on it, and it is such a beautiful way that he talked about it. And the second thing that is about the astrology is about the 7 countries. I'm just gonna say the words that are used for those areas right now. We have Iran, Russia, China, India, Egypt, Greece, and Balkans. And the interesting thing is that normally in Iranian astrology, these are the 7 countries that we have. We do not have the Balkans. Balkans and Greece are grouped together. Instead, we have Arabia, and Egypt is Africa. But Nezami has removed Arabia and put Balkans instead because of anti-Arab sentiments of the time, and also the story of Bahram Gur was a battle between the Arabs and Iranians, and they did not want to get a wife from Arabia. But there is a beautiful verse in the book right here, which is همه عالم تن است و ایران دل نیست گویند زین قیاس خجل. The world's a body, the heart is Iran, the poet's unshaken in his comparison. This verse was famous among Iranians and also astrologers all over the world because they believe that Iran is the heart of the world. This was the map of the known world at the time, and from all the way to the east and all the way to the west, Iran was in the middle. And that's what Nezami meant by Del, meaning that Iran is in the middle. And the thing that he says, the poet's unshaken in his comparison, means that he is not saying it because he himself is Iranian and he is just being nationalistic or there is pride. No, it's an actual fact. And he, as a poet, will stand by it, and he will never be shaken or ashamed by his statement. So the thing that happens when you say, okay, after the discovery of the whole world, we realize that Iran cannot be the heart because then we have the US. That is what has happened in the astrological world, that we have shifted central meridian to England, which is here, which to make it like a bit more center. But even with that, if we put a human body on top of the map of the world, as the poem suggests, meaning the head is all the way here in Fiji and the feet are all the way back here in Alaska, then Iran becomes the heart as well. So even after 1,000 years, Nezami is still not khejel or unshaken in his comparison. Now let's get into the main thing, the 7 tales by 7 princesses from 7 nations in 7 nights. So the first night is Saturday. The progression of the planets are not in the distance that they have from the Earth, like Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, but rather it is the week attribution, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And it is because the story is happening chronologically. It starts from Saturday that Bahram goes into the Black Dome wearing a black clothing and sitting with the Indian lady and listening to the story. So the story that the Indian lady talks about, the Indian girl, is City of the Bewildered. And the names are chosen by me. They're not the real names of it. They don't have names. They're just like first tale, second tale. And the City of the Bewildered is about a king who happens upon a person who is wearing all black. And the king asks that person, why are you wearing black? And the person says, I come from this city of the bewildered where everybody wears black. And the king decides to go on a journey and see that city and understand why everybody is wearing black. So you can see it is a Saturnian vibe of moving away and going on this journey of self-discovery. So the king goes there and sees everybody is wearing black. And then he wants to ask them, but he doesn't want to just be so upfront. So he starts to befriend a person and sit with them and give them a lot of gifts. And finally he asks them, why are you all wearing black? And the man says, I cannot tell you. And he says, no, please tell me. And the man says, do you really want to know? And the king says, yes, I do really want to know. And the moment that he says, I really want to know, a kind of basket out of nowhere comes and grabs him and lifts him up, and he starts traveling all around as if a huge bird is taking this basket and the whole world is upside down, and he goes into this place of not feeling afraid, and finally the basket lands on this beautiful field with flowers and birds, and it's so beautiful. And there are a lot of amazing, beautiful women dancing all around, singing, and they welcome him and they revere him as a really important guest, and they take him to their high lady, the priestess of that realm. And the priestess is so happy to see the king, and they start to converse and dance and sing and slowly fall in love. And the king asks, can I be with you? And she says, no, not tonight. You have to wait. I will be with you, but it is not going to be tonight. But he keeps persisting and he keeps asking her, no, please, I really want to be with you. It's such an intense relationship. Let's go. But she says no. And finally she says, you can be with one of my maidens tonight, and then tomorrow we'll see. And the king says yes, and he sleeps with one of the maidens. And then the next day, this thing happens again. He keeps asking her to be with him. She keeps saying, no, you have to wait. And then finally, they come to a compromise that he sleeps with one of the maidens. And this happens over and over and over again for 29 days. Until finally, at the 30th night, and I might add, 29 years is the amount that Saturn goes around the sun. At the end, 30th night, the king is really determined, and he says, I really want to be with you. And this is what the princess answers, the priestess. One who finds content in contempt shall forever be revered and exempt, and those who choose greed shall find themselves in direst need. But still, the king is saying, I really cannot wait. The lady says, I shall descend from this stubborn height. Achieved shall I be, though it may take time. Heart, soul, mind, and I you are, says the king. How can I keep patience from afar? So this conversation finally reaches a point where the priestess gives in and says, okay, if you want me, close your eyes and we will be together. And the moment that the king closes his eyes and opens his eyes again, he sees himself in the same basket, still traveling, and finally he lands back to the place that he was. And the man tells him, see, if I had told you why we are wearing black, you wouldn't believe, but now you saw it. All of the people in this town have gone through the same thing, and they all are now mourning and wearing black in sorrow of this separation that has happened between them. And this is what the king says in the end. "Kaz chonan pukhte arezui be kam, dur gashtam be arezui kham." From such mature, willed desire, I, by immature lust, was led awry. Again, having the connotation of what Saturn wants to teach, which is patience and contempt, and understanding that you will reach your glory by patience. So that's what happens in the end with the king, that he also wears black for the rest of his life. Now we go to the second night, which is Sunday, with the story of the cursed king. Now this story is about the king who, when he is born, astrologers see in his chart that apparently his Venus was not in a good place, and they see that he's going to have problems with the ladies. He will not be able to marry anyone. He will not be able to be committed to anyone. And in a really beautiful form of either self-fulfilling prophecy or actual prophecy, the king goes on to grow up and not being able to maintain relationships with women. He is having really fast flings. He becomes quite avoidant. This goes on, and he can never find true joy until finally he meets a really beautiful maiden. And he asks the owner of that maiden, I want this maiden, I want to marry her. The owner of the maiden says, this lady will not submit to anyone. She will not sleep with anyone. And I have sold this lady, this maiden, to many people, and after a few days they returned her back to me because they could not experience the joys that they wanted with her. Yeah, this maiden is sold but is returned, and the king finally says, no, I will do it, let's go. And he gets the maiden and he starts to try to kind of seduce her, be together with her, but she keeps saying no. So you can see it comes into a nice, interesting moment of an anxious person, an avoidant person trying to make a relationship work, where the king is just trying to tell her, let's be together, and she's saying no, but the king is someone who never goes for it. So this reaches a point where the king decides to take a leap of faith and tell a story of Solomon and his wife Belqis, or the Queen of Sheba, that they once had a child who had broken limbs and broken legs, and they asked God how we can fix this kid, and God tells them that know that by speaking the truth, this child's pain shall be removed. Since speaking the truth in God's presence shall heal the pain of hands and legs, we too should choose the truth to speak and aim straight at what we seek. So what happens is Solomon and Sheba tell each other the truth, and the truth is each of them ask a question. The king Solomon asks Sheba, now that you're my wife, have you ever felt or wanted to be with somebody else? And the Queen of Sheba says, yes, even though you are the most amazing person alive, sometimes I look at a beautiful person and my heart flies to them. And at the other hand, Queen says, you, Solomon, who have all of the glory and all of the things in the world, have you ever had jealousy, or have you ever had a desire for something? And Solomon says, yes, actually I have. Whenever somebody comes to say hello to me and comes to worship me in a certain way, I always see what gifts they have brought for me. So this truth that they say actually heals the child's limbs, hands and legs. And this inspires the king to ask this maiden that let us speak each other the truth as well. So I go first, the king goes first, and he says, the reason that I do not want to be with women is because at first women are really beautiful and amazing and they care for me, but the moment that I commit to them, the moment that they feel that they are a queen, they start acting up and they start not doing the things correctly and they start being nasty and mean. And that is why I never commit to anyone. And then on the other hand, the princess says, now that you said the truth, I will also say the truth. And the truth that she says is, every woman in my lineage, after they gave birth, they died. So I don't want to marry someone and give birth and die like them. So even though they say these truths to each other, they still cannot be together. They still cannot find that place. So what happens in the end is that there is an old lady, old hag, in the court, and he tells the king that you should make her jealous. You should sleep around with other people and she will be jealous and she will want to be with you. And as the king is trying to do this, the maiden comes and says, why are you doing this? We were supposed to be truthful to each other, and you now choose to be like this, like passive aggressive, manipulative. And the king says, okay, you're right, I should not have done this, I am sorry. And he realizes that this lady, this old lady, this hag was actually the reason that all of the women that were in the court would act up after they get committed to the king. So he removes that lady from the court, and then this truthfulness brings the king and the maiden together, and they both overcome all of the curses that were on them, the both curses. And that is the story of the Sunday. And you can see the theme of Sunday and Sun is truth and speaking the truth. And as the Saturn was traveling outward, the Sun was in the castle inside the home of the king. Now we go to the moon. This one is about Besher the Pious. Besher was a person who was living in Egypt. This one is from Kharaz, which is Russia. This story is coming from Russia. And the story is about this person who was pious, and he was a godly person. One day he's walking down the street, and then a woman is walking by, and a wind comes and removes her hijab. And Besher sees her face and falls in love with her, feels this rage that I want to be with her, I want to ask her out or something. But he is a pious man, and he says, no, this is wrong, I should not do this. And in order to overcome his lust and his urge, he just travels and goes all the way to Jerusalem. He says, if I go on this pilgrimage, I will be removed of this sin. And along this journey, he meets with a person who is Jewish. And I might add at this point that these books, especially Iranian classical texts, they are filled with anti-Semitism and racism. And we all should, as people who are trying to preserve this culture, must be accountable and hold ourselves accountable and say this is part of our history, and we will do better or as we move forward. Anyway, this Jewish person, which is filled with anti-Semitic stereotypes, is a really bad person and is really egoistic and proud and just a nasty person, asshole, sorry for my language. And during their travels, he's just trying to prove that he's better than Besher. And along the way, something happened. I'm going to move past it quickly. And he dies. That Jewish person dies. And Besher, since he was a really good person, he gathers his clothing and he says, I'm going to find the family of this person and return these to them. And after he goes and finds the family, knocks on the door, and the woman opens the door, and Besher tells him the story that this is what has happened. And then she says, oh my God, thank God for the death of my husband. He was a horrible person. He was not good at all. And you are such a good person for bringing these clothes back. It means that you're pious and you're good. Let's get married and you can inherit all of his wealth. And in order for you to get married to me, you have to see my face first to see if you like it. And she removes the hijab, and Besher sees that it is the same girl that he saw in the beginning. So it was a full circle that with piety and with trusting God, which is the moon qualities, you will reach the truth and the beauty that you want. Then we go to Tuesday, which is Mars Day, and this one is Saklov, which is the Balkans. It's the lady from the Balkans. The main character of the story is actually a woman, and she lives in this castle. She's the princess of the king, and she is such a powerful, strong, independent woman who has all of the knowledge, and she doesn't need a man. So she creates a really big standard of herself and the husband that wants to be with her, and she literally creates a stronghold, like a castle so big, with a lot of talismans and magic and doors and guards and a lot of perils along the way. And she tells someone to draw a picture of her. She puts the picture at the outside of the castle with a text underneath it that says, only men may trade this stronghold. It's no place for con men unbold. If you want to be with me, you have to prove your merit. You have to prove that you are good. And in order to do this, there are 4 things that you need to do. First, you need to be honorable. You need to be an honorable person with a good name. And you need to be able to untangle all of the talismans and all of the spells that I have put all around. Then you have to find a hidden door inside the castle. And then once you're inside, I will ask you some questions and you have to answer those questions correctly as well. If you do these 4 things, then I will be your wife. So it takes years for someone to be able to just even get close to the castle. It's such a perilous thing. And this has actually taken the prosperity of the land, and people are a bit sad. Until finally a man comes and he believes that he really does want to do that. So he starts the journey. He goes, finds a master. You can say it's implied a Sufi master. And he learns all of the ways of understanding the world. He learns magic. He learns how to untangle the talismans. And the reason he's doing all of that is not only him wanting to be with the beloved, but also it is doing it to free the people of the curse of this castle that is there as well. And that's one of the things about Mars. The battle of the Mars is not for himself. The battle of the Mars is for the people. So finally he manages to go untangle the spells, finds the door because of the grace that he has learned through his spiritual journey. And then he goes there into the castle, and then there is the whole ceremony of the questions that the lady asks. He overcomes them as well, and then finally they get married. So the whole point of the Lady of the Stronghold Tuesday is the merit, the quality of being resilient in facing difficulties. Whoever has drive, they shall rise. They shall bleed by their own ties. They're willing to cut themselves for reaching the end. Then we get to Wednesday, Mercury Day. The country of Wednesday is Maghreb, which is Egypt. And the story is about Mahan. It's called Demon Lair, or Abode of Demons. And Mahan was a noble man, and he had a lot of friends. That's also the quality of Mercury. He was well versed. He would talk to everyone. He was really well educated, and he was a merchant as well. And one night he was drinking, enjoying his party, and then he goes into his garden, and then he sees one of his distant friends who's traveling. And this friend tells him, see, I brought all of these goods, and I don't want to pay taxes on them. If you come and bring me in from this non-gate of the city, I will give you a lot of these goods, and we can share the profits together. And Mahan is like, yeah, let's go. I'm going to earn money. They go. But they go into the desert so deep, a lot. And then finally, he gets lost. Mahan gets lost. And then when the sun comes up, he sees that he is nowhere to be found. And he's walking, trying to find his way back home. And then he meets a man and a woman. And he tells them, yeah, can you guide me home? And they say, oh, you're here. Okay, we'll take you home. And then they take him again all throughout the night. But again, he's lost. And he wakes up in the morning and he sees another person who is riding a horse and says, this is what has happened to me. And the man says, oh, you are taken by the ghouls or by demons. And ghoul and demon is a mythical character in the desert who takes you astray from the path and ends up killing you. This is how you die. It's a metaphor for getting lost in the desert by the voices that you hear. Anyway, and he gives him a horse. Mahan rides on the horse with him to get to a place, but then by night that horse turns into a dragon and all of these things come. It's so visual and scary even. So another night goes that he's in this realm of not finding his way, and the next day he finds a well, and inside the well there is a window, and inside the window there is a garden, and as he enters the garden he wants to eat from that garden. Again, the garden turns into fire, turns into hell. So this happens a few times until finally he realizes, I don't want that goods. I just want God to guide me home. The only thing that I need is to be with God. He fled to God within his heart and walked shedding tears of blood. He gave up wanting another person to help him. He gave up wanting to gain money. He gave up wanting to get into a place where he would survive. All he wanted to do was to go back home. And home is where God is. So that's where he put his heart. And as he was crying and as he was trying, then finally someone showed up who this time it was Khizr. And Khizr is a prophet among the Iranian mythology who guides you to God. Finally, he reaches home. That's what happens in the end to Mahan. By bringing his faith back to God instead of the outside, he reaches home. Then we get to Thursday, which is Jupiter. And this one is the story about fair and foul, or good and evil. Fair and foul are two characters, and they start to go on a journey. And both of them have the gem or the essence of being fair and the essence of being foul. One of them is a good-natured person, one of them is a bad-natured person. So they're going on a journey and they start to go into a desert. And Fair doesn't know that the desert is longer than he thought, but Foul knows. So Fair drinks all of his water immediately, thinking that they will reach an oasis. But Foul keeps the water. So after a few days, Fair is quite thirsty and asks Fowl, can you give me some of your water? Fowl says, no, I will die. Fair says, I will give you some of these gems that I have instead of water. And Fowl says, no, you will give me the gems, you will drink water, and then when we reach an oasis, you will kill me and get the gems back. I don't trust you. The Fair says, so what should I do? Fowl says, then give me gems that you can't get back, which is your eyes. Give me your eyes, and I will give you water. And Fair is like, what? This is not okay. But finally he says yes. He gives Fowl his eyes, and Fowl steals all of his clothes and all of his gems and doesn't give him water and leaves him in the desert. And Fair is about to die, but what happens to him is that out of his good luck, out of his faithfulness, out of his hope that God will help him, he's picked up by these desert dwellers, by these nomads. And they fix him up and they try to help him. And the nomad has a daughter, and this daughter is really well versed in medicine. And out of sandalwood, she creates a medicine for Fair and fixes his eyes, and his eyesight comes back. And out of this, Fair marries the lady, the girl, and becomes the inheritant of the nomads. He becomes the big one in the nomad land. And so it shows that his faithfulness to his fairness and his goodness gave a result. So what happens next is that this nomad people reach a city, and there is a king of the city, and he has a daughter, and this daughter is suffering from epilepsy. And the king says, whoever can heal the epilepsy of my daughter, he can marry her and become the next king. So Fair goes and uses the sandalwood that healed his eyes to heal the epilepsy of the lady. And then he marries the lady and becomes the next king. And on top of that, there is a minister of that city whose daughter gets the smallpox, and Fair heals the smallpox with the sandalwood and marries that girl as well. So he has 3 wives now, like so happy and amazing. And it was during this period that he has become the king, so prosperous that he runs into Fowl and takes Fowl into his castle and tells him, you are the one who stole my gem. Now, what do you have to say for yourself? And Fowl says, yeah, it's my nature. I am a foul person. And you are a fair person, and you won't do anything for me, and you will let me go free. This is who we are. This is what we do. But then his father-in-law, Fair's father-in-law, kills Fowl and says, yeah, he might be fair and you might be foul, but I am justice and I will kill you. So the story of the Jupiter is about essence. It's about gem. And it's about, if you keep your vision of eternal triumph of good versus evil, the universe will show that to you. And finally, we have the country of Iran with the tale, The Garden. Now, The Garden is about another person who is noble and pious and a good person. And this man has a garden. And this garden is so beautiful and so amazing, and everything is prosperous there. And one day he's trying to enter his garden, but the door is closed. And he finds a way to go in, but then he's captured by all of these beautiful ladies, even fairies, you might say. And these fairies understand that he is the owner of the garden, and they tell him, oh, thank you for having this garden. We're just a bunch of beautiful ladies. We want to dance and sing here. And in gratitude of you letting us use your garden, you can watch our beautiful ladies and choose one of them to be with. They take him to this little cottage, and inside the cottage there is a little hole, and he can look through that hole and see all of the beautiful ladies that come there, and he chooses to be with one of them. Since he's so pious, he is just like looking and is like trying to hold his lust, but then finally he sees one of them and he really wants her, and he falls in love with her and tells the other ladies that I want to be with that person. What continues from that is they try to sleep together, these two people, in the garden house, in the cottage, but the cottage falls over. And they go into another corner of the garden, they try to sleep there, but then a mouse runs by, or a pumpkin drops off, or wolves come, or something happens that in the moment that they're about to get on the act, a sign from the universe comes and stops them from doing that. And then finally the ladies go into the girl and they think it's her fault. Like, you don't want to sleep with this beautiful man? But then this guy comes and says, no, do not punish her. It was an act of God. it was sent by God that we do not commit sin, we do not commit adultery. We have to get married and do it in the halal way, do it in the right way. And all of these difficult things that happened was because of that. So Venus, the last planet, is about keeping restraint until the truthfulness and the beauty is given to you. To recap, this is a kind of image that I have created of the attributions and the stories and the reasons what the stories are trying to say. And I'm just going to finish by bringing it into a bigger picture as a modern myth. Modern myth is a concept that is created by Bahram Gur in his book Where's the Thousand Tales. And what he says is, in the Iranian and in broader terms, in the Middle Eastern storytelling narrative culture, the theme is that there is a force of evil and there is a force of good. And us humans try to convince the powers of good to triumph over the powers of evil. And it translates in all of these different moments in our history in different ways. In the moments of most of the poetry, especially this one, we try to tell stories of merit, of morality, of spirituality to kings, so that kings choose to be good, moral, spiritual people, so that the land feels better. This is the role of the 7 wives of Bahram. This is the role of astrologers. This is the role of poets like Hafiz, that they try to appease the king by telling them these stories so that they may learn from it. And this is what also we have in the Arabian Nights or 1001 Nights, where Shahrazad is trying to tell moral stories to the king so that it prevents the king from killing ladies every night. And this is what the culture of astrology comes in next to the culture of poetry, court poetry, where astrologers would change the structure of the charts. They would change certain ways of communicating their predictions so that the king would be influenced in a way that would help the land and help the people. Thank you very much, and sorry if it was a bit long.